Okay. All right, we are live. Just gonna make sure people are coming in here. Hey, Yucky. All right, folks. This is our live Q&A session for August 15th, 2019. And we're going to start the day off with me going through the questions from the members from the field.farm. And actually, what I'm going to do here is, where is our chat here? There we go. All right, people come in. Hey, guys, how you doing? From Deutschland. All right. From Alberta. Walt is back from SoCal, Riverside. Cool, guys. Okay, I'm just going to pop out the chat here, move a couple of things around that makes it easier for me to do these things. And then I'm going to ditch that. Okay. Yeah, no glitches this time. Last time was a nightmare. I apologize for that. My my internet was I don't know. I think it was a neighborhood thing. I thought it was something on my end, but it wasn't. It was something in the neighborhood. So today, hopefully, goes a lot better. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to start with all the questions that I have that are preloaded, and I'm going to share with you guys my screen here, and then we'll have some time. We'll just answer questions from the folks here in our chat. So where is my, there we go, right there. Share screen. Okay, can you guys see that? Cool. So let's just jump in. And let me just double check that these are the questions for the 15th. Yes, this is it. So this is what I do each week now is I just, in the discussion forum from the field, I just make a post and then I say, leave me your questions for this week. And then people post them in there and then I read them and we just go for it. And so during the times where I don't do a YouTube live, which was last week because I was on the road, I just record it as a podcast. And for the most part, that's what it is. But I figure when I can, I might as well do these live sessions because it's kind of fun. I like doing it. And it actually gets it all out at once. And then it's like I can do a live thing as well as post the content. Otherwise, I'd just be here recording it myself. So doing it live, I don't see any problem with that. And then I can answer some of your guys' questions too, for those of you that are here. And we can just kind of hang out. So I'm going to jump into this question from Gelton here. It says, irrigation for a 1 acre plot. Looking to do something similar to Steadfast where you have the option for overhead and drip. How many hydrant type faucets would you use, all else being equal with normal pressure? I was thinking 4. Where would you place them in a rectangular shaped plot? What type of overhead sprinkler would you use, and where would you place those? I have wobblers everywhere else, but for this plot, I would rather use the traditional rotary pulsating type since they cover more space than a wobbler. You should look at the Maganet sprinklers from Netafim. They're hands down my favorite overhead irrigation I've ever seen. They are incredible. They get more range than the wobblers, but I think they do require head-to-head similar to, you're referring to impact heads on the bottom. But for me to answer this question, it's not a question of 1 acre in a rectangle. It would just be easier to say, how many blocks do you have? So a typical market garden block would be a 40 by 100, or it's more like a 40 by 105 if you want to have a bit of perimeter space after your beds end. And in that you would fit 10, sometimes 12, depending on how much walkway space you want. So let's just say 10, you're going to have 10 100-foot beds. That's the standard block. And in that, like the way Jean-Martin Fortier has it is he has 2 lines per block. And Eric at Steadfast doesn't have blocks in that way because he's just kind of crammed everything into that 1 3/4 acre plot. So if I tell you, you just use 2 lines per 10 100-foot beds, that should give you an idea of what you could use. If you're on open land, I wouldn't bother using rotary pulsating ones. I think you're talking about impact heads, like the ones that go. That's what I've used on my urban farm forever. Those are great for urban farming when you don't want to water your neighbor's lawn or a neighbor's hedge or whatever. You don't want to water the sidewalk. But for just farms where it's open land, wobblers are great. I think the Netafim Maga Net, I think those are better. So check those out. Hope that gives you some food for thought there, Gelton. Okay, so we got a long one here. In parentheses at the start from Jordan here. Feel free to paraphrase my question. It's got a bit of context around it. Hey, Curtis, we are starting a new farm next month in Australia, and we'll be scaling it up to 1.25 acres right off the bat with the potential of going bigger in the long term. You may remember visiting our current half-acre farm, Aratoa Market Garden. Oh, okay, this is... Yes, yeah, I remember you guys. This is awesome. Okay, Jordan, totally. In Northern New Zealand, just when we were starting out, after I came down for your course at Jody's place a few years ago. I actually did a video. If you guys are curious who we're talking to, I did a video with Jordan. It would have been 2 years ago. There was a string of videos I did in New Zealand. They would have been over probably January and February. I visited Jordan's farm. If any of you are curious, you can just probably, if you search New Zealand on my channel, you'll probably find it. Anyways, with a few years of success with our current farm and a bit more confidence, we are investing a lot more in the new farm, and we'll be starting out with a compact tractor, bed former, flail mower, flame weeder, and some TerraTech stuff, wheel hoe, rakes, etc., and a 5-row jang, quick cut greens harvester, etc. And I'm keen on leaning those messy, heavy labor tasks down to practically nothing. The task I dislike the most on the farm is pulling beds and moving tarps. Totally. So we'll flail mow everything. I think with a higher HP on the tractor and a gruntier mulcher, we can hopefully break crop residue down even finer than what I see you guys managing with the BCS at Steadfast. I see that the Vitruvian guys aren't using tarps, and it appears that Eric, they are tilling the residue in, but they're just leaving it fallow and cultivating regular. Can you expand on that anymore? Have you seen any other examples, or do you have any idea if we could just mulch, rotary plow, deep harrow, and then cultivate weekly with either a flame weeder or shallow tillage to have a clean bed within a couple weeks for reseeding? Yeah, I can expand on this for sure. I get the water retention may be an issue, especially in the dry climate we are moving to, but I'm assuming this is probably what the conventional guys are doing all the time. I'm not too worried about the weed pressure, mainly just about the crop breaking down enough that I will have a clean enough seed bed to run the jang through in a few weeks. Thanks, man. Loving the content. The scale of the farm you are hitting lately is right where we are at, and have really been able to refine our farm plan from binge watching from the field. It's pretty exciting to be starting off with a clean slate and a decent budget after all the innovation and tools that have been coming out over the last few years. That's awesome, Jordan. That's a great question. And that's like on the top of my mind too, because I'm writing a new book and I'm expanding on these ideas too. And I've actually decided to include, when I was first writing the book, I'm just giving a little preamble to this because it'll circle into your question. When I was first started writing the book, I was profiling market gardens all the way up to the size of Jean-Martin Fortier's market garden. So it's all still based on the sort of small scale hand tools and BCS models, but I've actually included a bigger farm, and I'm including Vitruvian farms as one of the farms that I'm profiling in the book. And we're going to be going into the tractor stuff because I'm super excited about it. And if I was farming, and not to say that I won't be farming at some point, but that's what I would be doing. I would be going to the small tractor route because I just think it just makes so much sense in so many different ways. So anyways, So as far as turning these beds over quick, and you said about 3 weeks, that's not an issue. There's a couple things you can do. So there might even be more. So one is, first of all, the context of what the previous crop is important. If the previous crop was a direct seeded salad green, call it a loose leaf lettuce, any like arugula, spinach, mustard greens, baby beets, like bull's blood beets, baby chard, anything like that, what I found, as long as the crop isn't too high. So if you've been cutting that crop consistently, and then you do a harvest, and then you're left with basically a short stalk of, say, 5 centimeters, 2.5 inches, you could essentially go in right out of the gate with a power harrow. You could skip the flail mower. You can power harrow it, and there's a couple different ways you can do it from here, but you can power harrow it and then let that crop basically just dry out. Because what you've done is you've scuffed up the soil bed, but you're doing shallow cultivation. And now what will happen is the sun will come up and that'll dry out in a day or two, really. From here, you could either remove that organic matter and compost it. But since you're going to be tractor based, I'm suspecting you don't want to do that. So what you could do then is let it dry out, and then you could harrow it again and fertilize and plant. Essentially, you could do that. And if you're maintaining your beds to be like stale beds, where you're on top of your weeds, and doing things like you can even get, this is a tool that I haven't seen Vitruvian use, but I saw at a farm called Wheelbarrow Farms just out of Toronto when I was there in the spring. I did a video with Tony about his electric tractor, but he had a tine rake for his tractor. And I love the tine rake. TerraTech make one. I have a hand one. They're awesome for greens beds, because what you do is you seed your greens. Let's say you might stay on a 30-inch bed system, or you might go to a 40-inch, which would be 120 centimeters for you down in New Zealand. Whatever it is, you're going to plant that crop. It's going to germinate in 7 to 12 days. And when it establishes its cotyledons, you can go in with a tine rake and drive over it. And the whole idea with a tine rake is you're doing preemptive weeding before the weeds are even seen. And that's important. And if you can do that twice before the crop establishes the majority of its foliage, you're going to get your crop come in with no weeds, because you've disturbed the soil in between the rows that are germinating, that it's basically it's disrupting any chance those seeds had to germinate. So that's one or two ways you it's 2 ways, because I said you could either remove the organic matter or you just harrow it again. That's kind of what they were doing. I've got a video coming out. It'll probably come out next week on YouTube. I was back at Wise Earth Farm with John Hofer, who's a good friend of mine. And that's what they're doing. They're harrowing the bed, but they're actually they're letting the organic matter just dry, because then they just scrape it out, and then it just sits there in the perimeter it just dries up, and then they refertilize and plant. But you could skip the step of pulling it out with the tractor, is if you just hit it again. You're essentially going to mix it in and then leave it sit. So the other way you could do it, none of the tractor-based farms use tarps. It's not practical, right? It's a lot of schlepping. So the other way, is if you have a larger crop, like something like a spent broccoli crop, where you've cut the heads and then you've got a lot of like carbonous matter in there, you're probably going to flail mow it. And then it's a similar process. Like a power harrow would make a mess of that, and it would tear up the soil too much, because you'd have these big stems that would be pushing around, and it would be a mess. So that's where you would flail mow, and then you could let that decompose a bit. So we're talking no tarps here. You could let that decompose a bit. It'll dry out. Then you could harrow it, let it sit again, and then you could plant. So similar to the last one. And then I guess from there, it's you could just go to straight tillage, so the all of those options I've said so far are shallow till or low till based, but you could also just till. And the more farms I visit, the more the less problems I actually see with tillage. And all these self-righteous people who virtue signal about it's horrible to till and all that. These people generally don't farm. They don't really know what they're talking about. Not to say that tillage is all good. There's plenty of examples of bad tillage, like the Dust Bowl and all that. But that's not what we're talking about on market gardens. We're talking about small areas of tillage. So another way to get into production quickly would be to flail it and then till it under. And then you could do a 1.5 to 2 week stale bed process. What they did at Vitruvian, I don't know if this is how they did it at Vitruvian. Actually, maybe it was. Maybe they flailed it, tilled it, prepped the beds. The beds sat for a week, and then they went in with a shallow cultivator, which actually looked like an old sort of, not like a Mulbird plow, but it has the shanks that are like a J shape or a U shape sideways, and then they would go over and just skiff the bed after it sat for a week or two. That disrupted the weeds, so that's essentially an old school way of doing a stale bed, and then they planted. So that's all I can think about for now, but that's some options. And that's a great question, Jordan. I appreciate that, because that's helping me consolidate the thought process of how I write about this and outlining that more, because it's something that people want to know, and I want to show those options. So great question. Thanks for submitting that. Oh, here we go. Here's somebody commenting to Jordan's post. So maybe I won't read the replies, because then that could just send us down a rabbit hole. I'll just focus on the questions to me. If anybody here is from the field member, they can just go in and check that out. Next question here is from Colby. Hey, Curtis, I'm new to market gardening. I'm in the process of planning out a plot of land for next year. I grew and sold microgreens last summer, but simply didn't have enough room in my previous home to grow anything beyond them indoors. We moved into a new home with about an acre of land, but I'd like to start as small as I can. Your YouTube vids in the past recommended starting off smaller is better. My question is, can you start off too small? I like the idea of keeping the garden manageable with cherry tomatoes, arugula, salad mix, salanova lettuce, and kale, given my novice experience. This seems like approachable crop choices, but still provide a variety of challenges I can tackle in order to get better over time. Of course, thank you for all you do. I've been enjoying watching all these videos from the field and hearing everyone's stories, making me excited to start my own. To take care. That's a great question. Can you start off too small? It depends on your context. If you're willing to keep a side job, then no. Then small is great. Like, I mean, I wrote about in my first book, I wrote about just different examples of how I'd seen people through my consulting practice do that, and how they balanced between, you know, working a 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, and then scale and changing their hours. So one thing, if you have some job flexibility that you can do, is you can keep 40 hours a week, but just work 10 hours a day, Monday to Thursday, if you have the flexibility, and then start freeing up Friday, and then you have Saturday. So you might have a small market garden based around doing a Saturday farmers market, and then you can get all your harvesting and prep done on a Friday, which is a grind, but you can do it. And then you have your Saturday market, and then you basically do maintenance on the farm or garden, in a way, market garden really, throughout the week, either in the evenings or early mornings. It's totally doable. So no, you can't be too small. I mean, I've seen all kinds. Actually makes me think that I should visit more like really small farms. The first market garden I ever saw was well before I was farming, and it was like right when I was starting. I was looking to buy a BCS, and I found this one guy south of Kelowna. I'm just gonna move this. The light is kind of reflected in the camera. Guy south of Kelowna who had a market garden of 1,000 square feet, and he was bringing product to market every Saturday. I think he was selling at, it was like the Summerland or Penticton Farmers Market. I even forget his name. This is like 12 years ago, 11 years ago. And he was doing it, and he was making money. He would go and make $500 at a Saturday farmers market. And so if you're transitioning into it, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like, what do you want to get out of it? What's your expectations? You know, like what works for you? It's all good. It's all possible. So no, there's no too small. It's whatever suits you, whatever suits your context. So hope that answers your question there to some degree there, Colby. Next question from Luca. Hey, Curtis, please talk about how to have unfrozen water on the farm in places where it can get -20. You did a great job with from the field. Thanks. Yeah, so I guess you're talking about doing greenhouse water over the winter, probably. And the most typical way that growers do this. And actually, if you go back, I believe when we did the video with Andrew Manns, he showed that. So when we did Manns Organics, which was probably one of the coolest farms I've ever visited, I learned so much from Andrew. He's just an absolute wealth of knowledge, and I really look forward to going back to his farm. But we did that video. Part one of that was July 12th, and then part two is July 19th. It's in one of those, but he shows their water system. They had the well, and in Alberta, it literally it gets colder than that. They had their well coming up in the greenhouse, and then from there it went into some kind of cistern. But the most common thing you see if you don't have your well into your greenhouse is people use those IBC totes, those big cubes. And so you have you could have 3 IBCs, depends on how big your greenhouse is, but you could have 3 IBCs that would probably be enough water to get you through a winter. And you don't need to water much in the winter either. That's the thing. Unless you're using that water for wet work, like washing and all that, then that's a whole other story. Then you might need more. But that's typically what people do. And there's actually, I wonder if I could just pull it up here. Let me see. I just filmed a guy. I was just in Toronto last week, and I filmed a good friend of mine, Jesse, and Zawadi Farm, and he had a setup. I'm just gonna go into my videos here and see, maybe give you guys a little where did I put that video? Oh, you know what? I haven't even copied it off my camera yet. Never mind. Well, anyways, he showed me this really simple pump he got from Princess Auto that just was a simple plug in with 2 hose bibs, and it pumps from one area out to the next. And so that's what he did. He was collecting water off his roof into these IBCs, and then pumping that into his greenhouse. So that's essentially what most people do. Is you're just going to have water in IBCs, and it's kind of neat too, because you get some thermal mass. If you're keeping that in a greenhouse, you're getting some thermal mass off that water, and it's also storing water for you. So it has sort of a dual purpose. But that's typically what people do there, Luca. Okay, so I got a few other questions. I'm going to close this share. And I see lots of questions piling up here in the YouTube chat. That's cool. Just Google it, dude. Alexandra Powell is just, what's on IBC? Just put it into Google and it'll tell you. It's just a big cube. It's like a big tote of water. Okay, so the rest of these questions I've got here in my Evernote. So let's just go through these. First one from William Roberts says, hey, Curtis, I'm not able to find any info on different heads for the wobbler sprinklers. I'm in Wales on really low mains pressure and want to purchase some for irrigation, but with so many different needs to choose, or for heads to choose from, I want to make sure I get the right ones. Can you let me know which ones you use, if you use them, or any link? Okay, so I can probably just quickly find it for you. I didn't know that there was actually multiple types of wobblers. I knew there was 2. There's like some smaller ones, and then there's some bigger ones. John Hofer, my buddy at Wise Earth, he's using the small ones and he swears by them. So let's just see here. I'm just looking around online here. I like to, when I Google things, I just go into images and then I just look for what I'm familiar with. There's from Neversink. Oh, here, you know what I can do actually? Oh no, I had a video on Magnets I've never published, but I was going to show you that, but that's not what you want. You want wobblers. I'm pretty sure it's just these ones here. I'll share the screen with you in a second here. I'm just going to find the right one. Yeah, this guy. Let's take a screenshot of this and then zoom in on it and then share my screen, and you guys can see Da, 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 da. Yeah, so this guy here. So if I can't tell you exactly which one this is, but you can just kind of figure it out once you see it. Where's my share screen? Here we go. Excuse me for a second there, guys. This guy right here. That one. That's what most growers I know are using. But I'll tell you what, if you're in a windy area, I don't know how windy it is in Wales, but if you're in a windy area, check out the Maganets. They penetrate wind, unbelievable. Wobblers are cool because they kind of toss the water up. So pretend my microphone is the sprinkler. It kind of tosses the water up like this, and it has a big radius. And they're neat too because you actually don't need to go head to head. Most sprinklers, you have to have head to head, meaning that the spray from one sprinkler stand has to touch the spray from has to touch the sprinkler stand of the next non. So not just the sprays, they have to overlap so that they actually touch the next heads. But wobblers, you don't really need to do that because they just throw up so much water, but they're horrible in wind because they throw water in the air, any amount of wind. Like even right now, I've probably got like a 10-kilometer wind. That would be enough in my climate, and I've seen them used here where it just shifts it over to one area, so you see these kind of uneven patches on your farm. So, but they're both great. The wobblers are great, and the Maganets are great too, and they're actually not very expensive. So the nice thing about both of those sprinklers is that they can run on very low pressure. Like the Maganets too. I think wobblers can probably run on a lower pressure, but those are yeah, they're great. Okay, so next question here from Jordan. Hey Curtis, love your work. I was wondering if you could answer my question / offer some advice, maybe even in your weekly Q&A. Yep, that's what we're doing here. I finally acquired about a third of an acre to start farming. I live on the Gold Coast of Australia in a subtropical climate. I love that place. It's such a beautiful place. I'm totally new to it. I've grown veggies at home for a while. I'm looking at starting small while working on the side to test the waters. My questions were: one, bare minimum infrastructure / tools I should get / need to get going and growing. Two, recommended veggies to start with. I don't want to grow too many things straight away. So yeah, I mean, I probably answered this question in many different incarnations before, but I would just suggest with starting with, well, as far as tools, if you start small, let's say, you could do a third of an acre totally manual. And so I'm assuming you're talking about a third of an acre in production. A lot of people, and I see this, one of the reasons I'm glad I don't have to read YouTube comments anymore is like people who just troll my videos. And when I've visited a farm and I say, like Scott Hebert's farm in Lower Mainland, Vancouver, in Chilliwack, it's like quarter acre. People are like, no, it's not a quarter acre. It's like, no, because we're not talking about the entire farm. We're talking about the production. So I'm talking about the production area. Same with Pakaraka permaculture in New Zealand. I did that video with them. Crushing on a quarter acre was one of my more popular videos. People are like, that's not a quarter acre. It's like, yeah, it is a quarter acre. The production's a quarter acre, you guys. And so if you're talking about a third of an acre of production, it's totally doable manual. Like you don't even need mechanized tools. Of course, you're going to work more, but I would start with a tilther is a good soil working tool for that size of farm, and you can do everything with it. You don't necessarily need a BCS. You could rent some heavier infrastructure like a BCS, or even get a Kubota tractor in there to do your initial breaking ground, get your beds shaped and all that. And then from there on, your bed prep's just done either manually or something like a tilther. And then I'll expand on the crops a bit, but I'll just kind of touch. I'll expand on the tools a bit, but I'll just touch on the crops a little bit first. Is I just recommend doing greens and baby root veg. It's a great way to start. You could even grow into doing microgreens, or you could start with microgreens. Like if you have my book, I forget the chapter, but I do outline some different sort of business plans that work with this that I'd found through my consulting practice, or even ones that I'd kind of tried myself. But I'd recommend just like either starting with something like microgreens and salad greens, and then expanding into some baby roots, and then maybe some more roots, like getting into carrots and beets and stuff like that later. But I mean, you could start a farm with 4 field products, salad mix, arugula, spinach, and something like baby kale, and then all those other greens could also go in your salad mix. And then you could do a couple products of microgreens, like real easy ones like pea shoots. Just start with that, like 5 products, boom, you're rolling. So you could do that, and then you need very little tools, especially if you're just doing greens. And you could rotate those beds enough that you're not going to run into too many problems. But as you grow, you could expand your crop selection, which would also help your diversity on the soil, and just kind of help your farm, the biodiversity of your farm as you go forward. But there's nothing wrong with starting really simple. I think you're on the right track. And so as far as tools to manage that, I mean, even if it's a third of an acre, I'd absolutely recommend a quick cut greens harvester. Like I wouldn't grow greens without that tool. And then you're looking at your sort of basic post-harvest infrastructure. If you're going to do lots of greens, you definitely want to have your post-harvest dialed in. You want to build a bubbler. You want to have a greens drying screen. You want to have a spinner. And you can find a lot of that content just for free on my YouTube channel. I certainly go into it in more details in my online courses and stuff. But you can get away with that. And then some hand tools, stirrup hoe, basic stuff, shovel, rake, things like that. Hand knives for hand harvesting, things like Salanova. Of course, bins. You're going to need totes for harvesting. You're going to need a walk-in. Definitely get a walk-in cooler. Don't cheap out. Just build a walk-in cooler. You can do that for less than $2,000, or just find an old restaurant style cooler. Basically that's it. Like that's what you would start with. So I would say you could get away with spending probably less than $8,000 to get all that stuff, if you look for deals, and then that's enough to get the ball rolling. So I hope that gives you some food for thought there, Jordan. Next question from Neil. Good afternoon. I was just wondering where to find any info on pricing of microgreens. Well, I think some of that's in my book. I definitely detailed it extensively in my online course, but I can just tell you. I mean, just go down sort of the list of products that I did later in my farm. Pea shoots, I used to sell bulk at $15 a pound. So like if restaurants are buying 2-pound bags or something like that, I would sell a 2-pound bag for $30. My retail price for pea shoots was, I would sell to the retailers at $3.25 a bag for a 4.4 ounce bag. And then they would sell that for $4.99. And then sunflower shoots, same price there. Radish, micro radish, I used to sell at $20 a pound bulk, like for restaurants. And then I would sell a 2-ounce bag to retail for $3.25, and then they would sell for $4.99. And then we did our rainbow mix, which was a mix of it was like 70 to 80% green leafy short pea shoots with later it was just micro kohlrabi, micro radish, and micro cabbage. And that was a colorful blend. We called it a rainbow mix. We sold those. Those were 2-ounce bag for $3.25, selling to the stores, or they sell for $4.99 on retail. And then I would sell that for $20 a pound to restaurants. So there's kind of a place to start. And then another question here from Alex. I got one more, guys, after this, and then we can just take YouTube questions. So we got some time for that. Alex says, hey, Curtis, do you have a strategy for dealing with garden symphylan and wireworm? So I didn't know what this garden symphylan was until Alex circled back and explained it to me. But so I don't have a solution for it. I don't know much about it. Wireworms, though, man, it sucks when you get wireworm. I don't have like a solution to hand you, though I have heard of people using some types of nematodes to deal with wireworms. John Hofer's field had some wireworms bad for a while, because I used to farm on that field with him, and we had bad wireworms. One thing I did to sort of mitigate wireworm damage in one year, because I had another field across from John's farm. I had a half acre that I used to lease across the street. And I had really bad wireworms there. And what I did was, an agronomist, a friend of mine who's an agronomist, told me this technique. You go and you take potatoes and you bury them into the ground about 6 inches to a foot, cover it up, put a stake with a flag on it so you know where they are. And then you come back and check those every week to see if the wireworms are making, it's like a bait trap, basically like a honey trap, a honey pot. And you see where the wireworms are the worst. And then what we did is we just made sure that we didn't plant anything that had wireworms in those areas. And we did that for a couple years and they became less of a problem. And then anything that was problematic to wireworms, like any root crops or things like that, we put on other sides of the field. And it seemed to have worked. But that's all I could really say to that. So I hope that provides some gives you some food for thought there. Okay, so last question from John. Hey, Curtis, been following you for about a year now and want to say big thanks for the incredible content you've shared. I have no farming experience, but I'm sure if I had completed one of those ancestral searches, I would find generations of farmers in my background because I have an absolute love for working outside, and they thought of growing food as a definite natural high for me. Admittedly, I have a lot to learn, but feel like for a brand new novice like myself, that with your abundance of knowledge you have shared, I can find success at running a small market farm. You absolutely can, my brother. With that said, I have not jumped in as of yet, but I'm ready to make the leap. I do have years of business experience in my background and have a lot of success running a few different businesses, including a restaurant. My questions are simple and straightforward. How would a brand new person like myself know if there's a market for potential crops I would grow in the area, Huntsville, Alabama, prior to investing the time and money into starting my farm? Two, what advice would you give an older person? I'm 47 to be successful long term. Well, first of all, number two, you're not that old. I'm turning 40 next month. And that's the most common age bracket of everybody, of all the students I've ever had over the world and the different workshops I've done. That's the most common um, age bracket, because what I've found is that people they usually have had a previous career and then they go into market farming, and that's a great place to be. So don't worry about feeling like you're old or anything like that there. I think with your experience in business, it's going to get you further in running a market farm than it would if you had experience working on a farm. Business experience is the best experience. So I think you're good there. And then as far as the way to find crops, I know I've said this probably in hundreds of interviews, but I'll say it again because it is worth repeating. Go to a farmer's market that you want to sell at. Go there in the morning, see what's on the tables, take notes, take pictures, go back an hour before the end of the market and see what's left on the tables. Don't grow what's left on the tables. That's an easy way to find that if there's a particular saturation, a market saturation with particular products and crops, and then look for the niches, look for the things that sell really quickly. And then that's like one way. I mean, it's not a guarantee, but it's a really easy way to see and get a visual representation of what there might be a demand for. Other ways are just to talk to people, is to go to potential grocery stores that might buy products and see what they're selling, and then talk to a produce manager, see if there's products that customers are coming in and asking about that they don't have access to. So there's opportunities there. So we're just looking for opportunities, right? And then, same thing with restaurants. It's not, I think it's generally not that great of an idea to go and like knock on a ton of doors with restaurants if you don't have some stuff to show, but it certainly doesn't ask to go eat at that restaurant. And maybe you can talk to the chef just casually. And as a customer, sometimes you can do that and then just ask casually and then, look for opportunities there. But that's what I would say. Go with something like that and just feel it out. A lot of this stuff is just getting out there and just looking around and just asking questions and letting your inquisitive mind find it. You're already an entrepreneur. So you're going to have that knack to look for opportunities and see things that maybe other people don't. So I would say you're on the right track, man. And yeah, don't feel like you're late getting into this, because you're not. Market gardening is hard work, but it's not like digging ditches. It's not like working on a road crew or roofing, or tree planting, which is what I did for 10 years, 9 years. So yeah, you're all good, man. Best of luck. Thanks for your question, John. Okay, so what do we got in the chat? How you guys doing? We doing good? Curtis, answer me this. Why are you so awesome? I don't know. Am I awesome? Hey, there's John Faulkner. Right on, dude. Hey, if any of you guys, hey, John, paste the link in the YouTube chat, and I'll tell people to check it out. John filmed some great videos of me and Jean Martin at our the last workshop I did at Jean Martin's farm, and they're great. What's up to me? Hey, Curtis, what do you think about the grand solar minimum? Do you think it will have an impact on growing food? Possibly, but I don't get too freaked out about this kind of stuff, because like before I knew about the grand solar minimum, I was freaked out about climate change. And, I saw Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth back in whenever that came out. Was it 2005? It was pretty old. None of that stuff came true. So, and I know, he's one of the top cronies, so he's got a reason to sell people fear about that. And there's a lot of money to be made. And I'm not saying that's necessarily true. I'm not saying that's the case with grand solar minimum, but all I can say is there's a lot of fear mongering out there across the board. And do what you can do to prepare for it. Grow in greenhouses. Make sure you got access to water. Make sure you got options. Hi, sweetie. So I don't get worried about that stuff. I'm more worried about what all these crazy people are going to do who live on their cell phones all the time, man. I was in Toronto airport last week, and I swear every family I saw there, their kids, even like 8 months or younger, had iPhones. They're glued to iPhones. I saw this one family that was on both flights. We were in London, Ontario, and then we flew to Calgary on the way back, and then we flew to BC. And I saw this one family that their daughter was younger than our daughter, and she was on her iPhone for 9 hours, and her parents thought that was cool. I'm more worried about what's going to happen to all these children whose brains aren't developing properly, and the synapses in their brains aren't linking to empathy, to the world around them, and even their limbs. And there's the psychological studies I've been looking at about what social media is doing to children and what devices are doing to children. I'm far more worried about that than I am the grand solar minimum. I'm far more worried about 5G, to be honest, than I am the grand solar minimum, because that might be here in a couple of years. And I think I want to be out of the city if 5G comes here. But I don't know if I told you guys this. I'm going to do a video on it soon. The consultant I hired to help me do this to my house, we've had some scheduling issues, but his name's Ross Anderson, and he's great. And if you guys are curious about it, I did a video with Press for Truth with Dan Dix. You can just go on YouTube and put in Press for Truth, and then put like 5G Curtis Stone or something like that. You'll find it. I did a video with him explaining what I did. And so we basically we electromagnetic. We made our house a Faraday cage. So I don't have Wi-Fi at my house. Like, everything's hardwired. In fact, right now I turned my Wi-Fi on so that I could sit here in my balcony and do this. But other than that, we don't have Wi-Fi in our house. All of our internet's hardwired. And then we painted our house with a nanocarbon paint called Y Shield. It's basically like what they put on stealth bombers. And so you can barely get a cell signal in our house, because we have a cell tower 2 blocks away from us. And I hired this guy to kind of analyze how much of this, how this electromagnetic frequencies is impacting our health. And I've looked at a lot of research about how it does impact our health, particularly with children. That's where my wife and I were most concerned about it, was that our kids' heads can just absorb Wi-Fi and cell radiation and stuff like that. And so we just thought, well, maybe it's bogus, but we only spent $2,000 to basically do this to our house. So I thought it's a good hedge either way, whether it's totally accurate or not. And I'll tell you what, I sleep better than I've ever slept. My whole family, we sleep amazingly, because we have these, my friend Ross, who consulted us on this project, he has these electromagnetic frequency readers. And so you can stand outside, like where I'm sitting right now, I can almost see the cell tower. It's kind of behind my greenhouse, but I'm getting blasted by about 8,000 to 10,000 microwatts per meter squared. And ever since we painted our house with this stuff, we go in our bedroom and we get 5. So it goes from 8,000 microwatts per meter squared to 5, which is considered safe for humans, particularly babies. And so we're pretty stoked about that. So I know I went on a tangent there, but I'm more concerned about things that humans are doing to us than what the sun is doing or what the planet is doing, because I think humans and governments and big corporations are a lot more nefarious and don't care about the repercussions of what is done to others. Nature's always a bitch, right? And so what are you going to do? So yeah, I don't worry about it too much. Let's go. Man, there's a lot of questions in here. I got a similar t-shirt. Yeah, I got all these great t-shirts. I order from libertytees.com. JA, do you think the paper pot transplant would work with hemp seedlings? Yeah, totally. I was at a wicked hemp farm in Colorado. That video is coming out next week on From the Field. Clutch Hemp Co. That's coming out on the 23rd. They don't use paper pot, but they could. They're too big to use paper pot. Like they're thousands of acres, so they're like large scale mechanized. But yeah, you could. And what you could actually do with it, and I've been kind of experimenting with this myself here, is you could pot up clones into the paper pot trays or the chains. Haven't tried this yet. And you could plant. So I think so. I think it's worth a try. Certainly seeding, no problem. You could, and we've got a new drop seeder coming out at Paper Pot Co. It's been almost a year in the making. We should be launching that product in October. And we've got a plate for hemp because I'm a grower myself, just personal at home. And yeah, so you totally could. How do I get rid of bindweed? I did a video on it. Just put it into YouTube. Tater Chip, hey from Montreal. Hey man. Gary is saying PPC or bust. Totally. See how they locked Maxime Bernier out of the debates? It's insane. It's insane. I think they know he's too smart and too articulate and saying too many things that Canadians actually want to hear, that they don't want to have him in the debates. I hope that turns around. I signed a petition for it. Actually, if anybody follows Canadian politics and wants to see Maxime Bernier, check out the petition they have to get them back into the debates, because they were supposed to be in the debates. I don't want to talk about politics too much. Kind of tired of it. Brian King, love your content, Chris. But I switch back to the Trump rally. Nice, dude. What do we got here? Yeah, just talking about bindweed. Just go on my video. Chris Polk comments, permanently round up sustainably years of work. It's true. It's actually true. If you have bindweed, and I'm not going to advocate for people to use herbicides. However, there's a time and a place, and I would never use it to broadcast. But if you have like a perimeter problem with bindweed, or you see it patches in areas, just apply it directly to that. It will get rid of it. Roundup will do that. And there's a lot of organic farms that actually do that. They just do it before they get certified. So a lot of farms that I've seen in my travels, they have like sort of marginal soil. It's been like post heavy industrial ag land, like really crap soil. And then they get some sort of invasive weed problem in there. And they're like, man, to manage this organically is almost impossible. And we have the land. What are we going to do? So they broadcast Roundup or some kind of herbicide, and then they let that sit and it's fallow for a year, and then they get it back under production. Then they start their 3-year transition. So again, not advocating for it, just saying these are things people do. Because to manually dig out bindweed is next to impossible. I've never been able to do it. So yeah. What else have we got here? Have I read about Andrew Yang? Yeah, oh yeah. I know all about the UBI thing with Andrew. I think UBI is insane. I can't stand it. I think living in a world where everybody is getting free money from the government means that the government will never get smaller ever. I mean, it never does anyways, really. But if you have, a friend of mine put it this way, he's like, if you had everybody on UBI, if you ever tried to take that away, you would have a nation of trolls trying to take you down. And so I think I like to think about these things as a farmer. I like to think about these things in a similar way, that I think everything in our in human society, maybe even the universe, is levels of agriculture. In that, there's the Illuminati pyramid or whatever, right? Like the hierarchy all makes sense. Everything's on a need to know basis, and you know UBI sounds like farming humans to me. So that means that we're going to be more dependent on the system, less resilient, more fragile. No, thank you. That sounds like a horrible existence. I wish we would go back to being more stronger. I wish we'd go back to being more like wolves than going back to being more like sheep. And maybe that's me. Maybe there's a reason for sheep, and maybe, you know, I don't know. So yeah, I've heard about Andrew Yang. I think he's a smart guy. I actually like him. And the other Democrat I actually like is Tulsi Gabbard in the U.S. I think she's pretty cool. I think those people are genuine. I don't know if Yang's necessarily anti-establishment. Gabbard certainly is, but I don't want more government. I want less government. And I feel the same with farmers. I've been working on this documentary about the ALR, which is in British Columbia here in Canada. We have the ALR. It's the Agricultural Land Reserve, and it's basically it's sort of a Marxist land ownership. It's like a socialist land trust, basically, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, where the government essentially owns all the land and people buy it. I don't know why anybody would buy ALR land. The more I've learned about it, I've interviewed over 20 farmers now, and it's a nightmare. And it's what happens when you have big government. Is you have big government that can't understand all the needs of individuals in different situations. Then you have these blanket policies that might stop one particular problem, but then screw over all these other people. I interviewed a woman who's a mother of a longtime friend of mine, and they're a family farm in the Okanagan here, been farming here for like well over 30 years. And they had a property, a secondary home built on their ALR land 17 years ago. And then the NDP in Canada just passed another bill called Bill 52, which I'm going to have a video coming out soon about, actually, and a petition with that to stop it. But they're making these people tear down their home that they had for 17 years because now they don't want to have any homes. And so the policies are essentially destroying the family farm. And, I've looked at a lot of stuff, and, I've read Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030, and those plans, which all the Western nations signed on to, basically want to get human beings off land. They want to get people off the land and pushed into cities. And the cities are just a farm for liberals. You get people into cities, they're more controllable. They require more from the government. It's why when you look at political maps, and I know I'm talking politics again, people always ask me these questions, is you look at the way politics are set out geographically, it's very interesting. Cities and population centers are way more liberal. Country areas are more conservative, because people in the country take care of themselves. They make stuff, they grow food, they're productive as far as creating physical things, whereas people in cities have more intellectual pursuits. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I'm essentially an urbanite. And you can see the way the politics divide. And so I guess the powers that be would love to push everybody into cities, because then they all become dependent on the government, and then they're all going to be demanding things like UBI, which to me is a nightmare scenario. But I don't like that. And I don't like how with this ALR thing in Canada, this attention was to preserve farmland, but at the cost of destroying the family farm, which is insane. And it looks like they're just creating incentives for corporate monoculture, because that's what makes money. That's what pays taxes. It's not what's sustainable or necessarily good for human beings, but it's what makes money. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. You were just an economic engine for the powers that be. So yeah. Raisin Sock, hit the Rogans up. Yeah, hit the thumbs up, guys. Hit the thumbs up. Helps the videos get out there. I like to call Joe Rogan Toe Rogan, because he looks like a toe, but he's a great guy. Maybe I'll be on Joe Rogan's show one day talking about farming. That'd be pretty cool. Dear Curtis, you got me into farming 4 years ago on YouTube. I run a small microgreens operation in New York State. 260K sales this year and growing. You're the best. Visit when you're in the East Coast. Dude, that's awesome. Vincent, email me and maybe I will. Maybe I'll come and do a from the field video because I'm going to be, when am I going to be out there next year? But yeah, hit me up. Hit me up. I'd love to come up to New York. Walt, any opinions on the Red Ox / Timor walk behind tractors? No, I don't know what those are actually, Walt. Phil from Greer, South Carolina. Been watching for 3 years now. I use the Johnson Sioux composting system, the best no turnover ever. Use wood chips and grass and leaf mold. That's cool. Yeah, John at Wise Earth, he's got it dialed. He's got that system dialed. It's really cool. So that's great. I'm glad that's working for you. Adam Hoffman, hey Curtis, we're members of a small local farmers co-op based in Eastern Colorado, and our co-op runs a community market. We're trying to figure out a good fee model for other booths that are not part. Oh, so the co-op members have a particular fee to set up to be there. Oh, and then here you go. Of our co-op, we currently hold the market for 6 hours every Saturday. Members of the co-op pay a flat 10% fee. Man, I'm not a fan of that. I'll tell you right now. I don't like that rent-seeking stuff. I'd rather just pay a fee. I think it's more fair. I don't think it's anybody's business to look at your numbers. I don't like that. It just seems sketchy. It just seems like you're penalizing people who are doing well, and you're help. It's like welfare. It's like corporate welfare or welfare. It's like you're incentivizing people to not do a lot of sales. Like that sucks. 10%. So you do 1,000 in sales, you got to pay $100. But if you make $100, you got to pay $1 or no, $10. I don't know. I would just charge a flat rate. Our farmers market, the way we did it is because I used to be on the board of directors. I liked the way we did it, and they still do it this way. I'm no longer on the board, but it's $75 for a 10 by 10 stall per day. That's the day rate. And then the members who are the permanent members, they pay all of it up front for the season. They pay for 26 weeks or something like that. And then it's upfront, and it works out being $15 cheaper or something like that a day. That's what I would do. I don't like skimming off the top of people's sales. I don't think it's anybody's business to see what you sell. The government already does that. Like farmers markets should be more free but that's just my feelings on it. Yeah, you kill the fungi and bacteria. I guess somebody's bummed out about or butthurt about the tilling. Yeah, you'd be surprised how many like hate messages I've gotten over the years about people. Like, it's so funny. People who are the most passionate about one idea, like whether for or against, in my experience, usually know the least about the subject. And I've always found that, like, any experienced farmers I know, like even farmers that are super experienced who actually do proper no-till farming, they don't get all angry and butthurt about other people tilling. They're just like, this is how I do it, and it's my thing. Whereas like people who just like spend too much time watching YouTube videos and cruising the internet and commenting on Facebook subjects and threads, get all bent out of shape when they see somebody doing something like tilling. It's because you don't know anything about tilling, because you're not actually farming. If you were actually farming and you saw farms doing tillage in a good way, you would change your opinion, because you're most likely uninformed. If you're that angry about it, it's because you actually don't know what you're talking about. Ian saying, I like Elaine Ingram's advice with doing one last light till with good quality compost and maybe some amendments, and not till after that. What's the point when the goal should be building healthy soil? Well, the point is that you can actually build healthy soil and quicker with tillage. That's the point. You can change the physical composition of soil with tillage. And You know, Elaine Ingham isn't a god. Elaine Ingham isn't a farmer. Elaine Ingham is great. I think her work is fantastic. But she's not the only opinion in the house. There's a lot of people out there who do it. A lot. Elliot Coleman has been rototilling the soil for like 40 years, and his soil's amazing. It's a balance, right? It's not, everything isn't black and white. There's many shades of gray. There's many different contexts. There's many different soils. There's many different climates. There's many different reasons to till or not to till. I've certainly touched on a lot of them in previous videos, but like, do what works for you. Like, who cares if somebody else is tilling? It's like, many people do it. And the reality is, if you eat organic produce, you're eating produce that has come from farms that are rototilling. There's very little commercial produce you're going to find that's not rototilled. If it is, it's not organic, because the whole no-till thing was pushed by big ag that desiccate crops. So the way that they do it with, you know, super huge commodity farms like field peas or soybeans or things like that, is they desiccate the crop with Roundup. So it means you eat Roundup, and then they can basically mow it over and just seed with a seed drill right into the crop again. So yeah, they don't till, but you're eating Roundup. So I know that small farms that are doing no-till, and I know that Elaine Ingham is not saying that, and that's not my point. A lot of that no-till stuff comes from big, large-scale ag, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm all for that. Let's learn a bit from everybody, because there's so much good information out there, and there's so many great people doing great work that we can pick the best of what suits our context and go with that, you know. So whatever, if you don't want to do if you want to do no-till, do no-till. If you want to till, do till. Whatever works for you. But I guarantee that if like, it's a skin in the game thing. It's like, you can sit there and be self-righteous about no-till and all that, but I guarantee if you buy organic produce anywhere in the world, it's from a farm that rototills. So put your money where your mouth is, and grow all your own food no-till, and then see how you look after 6 months. That's my challenge to those who like to continuously rag on the tillage. James saying, hey Curtis, what type of greenhouses do you recommend for a place with mild temperatures and some wind? I would say I love the Florida type greenhouses. I did those in I did a YouTube video about that. When was that? It was like last November or December. So check that out. I think those are great, especially for winds. You know, with the mild climate, the greenhouse is really probably more about keeping the rain off. And I got a great video coming out with Ray Tyler tomorrow at From the Field. And Ray kind of explains his strategy with using caterpillar tunnels. And so caterpillar tunnels would probably be great too, because they're cheap. And the way you do it is you just run a channel lock on each end and open-ended. So they're in Selmer, Tennessee, I think it's a zone 8A or 8B, zone 8B maybe, pretty hot and crazy, 100% humidity in the summer. And so the way they're doing it is they're actually using their tunnels with the plastic on all summer. And the reason is to shed rain. That's the reason. And Ray has a really cool way of doing it. I talked about it in a previous YouTube video, but Ray had this great way of, he tilled the outside of the cat tunnel, and the plastic runs right to the ground. He tilled and then dug out these trenches, and then slightly graded them out to the paths where it goes into like 6 inches of really coarse wood chips. So when they get heavy monsoon rains, which they'll get 3 inches of rain in half an hour sometimes. And I've seen it, it's nuts. It flushes out, but then it hits the cat tunnel, runs to the side, flushes out to the perimeter, and then basically just absorbs and makes its way out to their culverts. And I did a video on YouTube. Oh no, it was on From the Field. It was one of the earlier ones we did in the winter, where I talked about farm design and how Ray diverted water and all that. I might have put a shorter version of that up on YouTube, but so cat tunnels, man. I mean, it's cheap. Cat tunnels are so effective. Mega Dempsey, I have a question regarding microgreens. Have you ever had the local health inspector to do an inspection? Mum Seeds told me I have to contact them to let them know I sell in BC. They tried to, but I told them that they're not welcome on my property, so they didn't come. So but I'm an anarchist. So don't listen to me unless you're crazy like me. But no, I had the health authorities reach out to me when I was growing microgreens, and I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole of how law works and common law and what the government can and can't do and who has jurisdiction over you. And according to my research, is that the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, actually has no jurisdiction over you. It's called voluntary compliance. So if you're small, it's not. If you're big, then you're going to have to comply, because then they'll send resources after you to take you down. But if you're small, like I was, like I had these people contact me and they said, we want to come do an inspection on this date. And I said, one of the things I've learned about when you get into common law is when the government comes at you with something, it's an offer. And the way around it is to accept the offer on conditions. So you don't say no, you say, okay, but here's my condition. So I said to them, okay, yeah, you can come on this date, but I have 3 conditions. One is I need a certified true copy of the document, which is if there's a legal document in Canada that has jurisdiction over you. And I know there's probably some hardcores that are into this that might say, oh, Curtis, you're getting it totally wrong. So I'm just telling you from my perspective and what I did, and it worked. Is I said I need the certified true copy of the document, and so that has to be signed by the Queen or the Governor General, because Canada is a monarchy under the Queen. And then I said I need all documents that say you have the authority to act on the Queen in good faith and all that. And then I said I need a consulting fee of $250 an hour or something like that, plus $40 an hour for all my staff to be available and provide SOPs. And he said, sorry, I can't provide you with any of that. Have a nice day. And that was it. So moms as a business have an obligation to protect themselves, to tell you that, but it's up to you. And I'm not saying do what I did, do what you want, but that's what I did. And they never bothered me again. And like literally they never bothered me again. And I was terrified when I first got it, because I was like, oh God, there it goes. These guys are going to come on my property. I'm going to sign something that's going to give them jurisdiction over me. And then they're going to make me do all these BS compliance things that are going to cost me probably $60,000. And I was worried about that at the time. So that's what I did. So take what you will from that. But I don't like the government, and I don't immediately give people authority over me, because I'm not. That's just not how I play. But I'm a black sheep, and I know that, and I know that a lot of people think I'm crazy for it, and I'm cool with that. So back to farming. You go over different seed wheels for the Jang for different crops, but you don't really talk about gears and gear arrangements per crops in your book. That's because when I wrote my book, I never changed the gears. That's why I kept them at 9 and 14, or 14 on the front, 9 on the back. Now, if you go to paperpot.co and then go into the Jang, go to the Jang 5 thing, and then we have a little chart in there that shows some different gear ratios. And we did that because then you can use a minimum amount of rollers. So, excuse me, if you have a JP5, you have 5 rollers. And so to only keep your gear ratio at one thing means you have to have 5 times whatever types of rollers you had. So that's why we did that. Whereas if you have a JP1, it's just easier to get a different roller and keep your gear ratio to the same for the most part. I know Eric Schultz, he only changes his gear ratio once on his JP1. I think he goes from a 9 to a 10. So it's like 14 on the front, 9 on the back. He'll go from a 14 on the front to a 10 on the back. But then otherwise, I think that's what he does. But that's why. So if you go to Paperpot Co. under the Jang, you'll see like I did all this R&D to figure it out. And so it's all in there. And you know what? Thank you for reminding me, because I'm actually, as you say that, I'm putting that in my notes for my book right now to actually go in and change that. So thank you, because I'm actually updating all of the content in the book from the first one to update it to where like it's been for me in the last couple of years and what I've learned on other farms. And so I'm going to put that in the book right now. So thanks for that. Note here. I love when people give me good questions that can help more people that might have the same question. So update the Jang rollers and gear ratios for the book. Thank you for that question. That's awesome. Hey Curtis, what kind of bags do you use for microgreens? I don't have any more, but they're just gusseted bags. In my course, like I get into all that stuff. Um, I forget what they are off the top of my head, to be honest. What are your thoughts on onions? I love onions. I have tons in my garden. Um, yeah, onions paper pot. Man, John Hofer at Wise Earth, he's got it dialed. I got to go do a video about that specifically now that you mention it. Actually, I'm going to write a note to that because I've been on his farm a couple times this year. I got 2 videos with him coming out in the next little bit here on YouTube. But I should go and do a specific one because he's got this really dialed system with the paper pot and doing Red Wing and like Spanish onions and stuff. And it's just the beds are thick, like it's using 6-inch chains, 4 rows, and he makes $1,000 per 100-foot bed of onions, and it's amazing. It's really really impressive. Um, Go to John's and do a video about onions for the paper pot. Hey, if any of you guys use the paper pot or the Jangs or any of that, and you want more content about that stuff, go to I have a second channel. It's the Paper Pot Co channel, like me and Diego's company, and I just posted 2 videos up there today with Ray Tyler that are snippets of what's going to be from the field tomorrow. But yeah, go check that out. Just put Paper Pot Co into YouTube, and there's quite a few good how-to videos up there if you use any of the tools that that we sell. Also, I'm going to wrap up pretty soon here. Also, if anybody wants to join from the field, the link in the show notes is live. So I've been doing it with these closed memberships, and I'm going to do it that way to continue, like just for the finish of the year. And then in the new year, I'm going to try another way of doing it. I think it might be something like I might only sell the annual memberships at a discount once a year in the first quarter, and then just leave it open for a monthly thing constantly. But for now, the time being, if anybody wants to sign up, they can sign up. The link's in the show notes here. People talking about Rogan as a shill. I don't know about that. I really don't know about that. It's so easy to go down the rabbit hole and think anybody's a shill. I'm sure some people think I'm a shill. It's just like, it's so easy to do that. Nicola saying universal healthcare in the UK is entirely unsustainable and corrupt. Don't use the model, whatever you do. We rely on the US private innovation. It's so true. Canada's system is a nightmare too. Canada's good if you get an injury, but it's horrible if you have an illness. It's horrible. You just get in line. And I had a friend who died of cancer who should have got treated 6 months ago before she did. And then she was actually going to the US. She was driving down to Detroit from Toronto to get treatment, and couldn't get treated fast enough here in Canada. So it's not a perfect system. People think that the government's horrible at everything. They can't even build roads. It's terrible. Why would anybody I don't know why people want the government. We're sheep, I guess. We've just been, public school system has indoctrinated us for so long. And hey, new book I just read, Fake by Robert Kiyosaki. Amazing. Fake money, fake teachers, fake assets. If you're into the money system, the financial system, and how the rich don't pay taxes, holy crap, that is an eye-opening book. Amazing. I've kind of been hip to that stuff for a while. He really kind of gets into it. Like, why does Jared Kushner not pay taxes? How does Donald Trump not pay taxes? It's not that they're doing everything legal. It's just that they leverage debt in a really smart way, and they keep reinvesting into assets, and they're essentially doing the work that the government wants people to do. And so they set up these tax incentives to do that, to push people who are willing to take those risks to do that. In a nutshell, not explaining it very well, but that's how the rich don't pay taxes. And it's interesting. Ontario Hashish says, Curtis, you say a new thing every year. I guess regarding tillage. Well, yeah, I'm constantly learning, dude. So yeah, if you're not learning, you're stagnating. So yeah, I do. The more information I learn, the more I change my opinion. And I'm very proud of that, actually. Sometimes when I'm feeling down, I imagine Trump having to work the land to feed his family. Yeah, can't see that happening. Curtis, you ever been to Pennsylvania, around Pittsburgh area? If so, what was your experience visiting small farms there? I've been to Pittsburgh a few times, actually. I've been to Pennsylvania a number of times. Not when well, no, I went there for Mother Earth News Fair a couple years, 2 or 3 years ago, Seven Springs. And then my old band played in Pittsburgh and Philly quite a few times. So I've been there. But I haven't visited a lot of farms. It's a beautiful country. It's beautiful. Ludwig, what's the most important when buying land? Big woods or fields or quality of the land? That's a big question, man. Have I done a video about that? Because that's a good subject. I could riff on that for like an hour. That's a really good subject. I did a video with Rob Avis at From the Field. It was back in, Rob Avis is a good friend of mine. We're like blood brothers. We're like 5 days apart in age. He's an ag consultant, and he does amazing permaculture work as an engineer. We did a video. When was it? I'm looking at my calendar here. It was earlier in the year about like that exact subject, talking about like what to look for in land, how to make these big decisions. So there's a lot. For me, location is important. I want to be near. I want to be a total off-gridder. So I'm interested in. I want sun. I want a place that's sunny. I don't mind high elevation. I don't mind low zones. Like I could do a zone 4, but I want to be near fresh water. I want micro hydro energy. I want solar energy. I want. I'd rather actually have land that was more rocky, rural, and treed than ag land, because you can make land farmable. You can farm anywhere. And it depends on the kind of farming you want to do. Like, I'm not interested in doing large scale farming, right? It's market gardening to feed my family and maybe a community. So I'd rather be in the hills and have access to the other natural resources. That's just my preference, but it depends on your context. I was just looking. I was just about to answer another question, and then it skipped. Big agriculture is destroying the planet with GMO crops and all 80 poisons they put on it. Yeah, kind of, but don't let it get you down. We had a long time to go on this planet, despite all the fear mongering that the mainstream media throws at you. You know, like I've been into this. I've been I guess I would have considered myself an environmentalist from the time I was 12 years old. I don't think I do anymore, because there's so much bullshit in it. Like, there's so much fake news, and there's so much. Like, I always like to think about who benefits from things and what's the incentive to tell people certain things. And when you go down the sort of the rabbit hole of who benefits from the climate change hysteria, points to all the same cronies who fund the military industrial complex and all the people who rent-seeking people who make money doing nothing. And they want the sheep. They want the sheeple and the proletariat like us to live in eternal fear and hate themselves and feel guilty about everything, because then we can be controlled. It's just a new way to control people through fear. And it's not that new, really. But, you know, now that the Western world is predominantly secular, they can't control us from fear of God. So now they need to control us from fear of our own repercussions. So, like, make man the devil, and then make us hate ourselves and feel helpless. And then the government offers the solution. And so if you just give us more tax dollars, we're going to save the planet from climate change. And I think it's a bunch of BS. Not to say that human beings aren't doing bad things to the planet. They certainly are. But who thinks that the government can fix that? The government's horrible at everything. So I don't subscribe to that. A couple little rugrats here playing in a pool. What else do we got here? Okay, I'll just take a couple more and then we're gonna shut her down. And Earl saying, any knowledge on island farming from Puerto Rico to Hawaii? Yeah, I mean, it's maritime climates are interesting. Jordan, who asked one of the questions earlier from the when we went into the forum, New Zealand is a very maritime climate. The clouds move so fast. They move as fast as cars, and so you got to be ready for anything. from what I've seen, using greenhouses, like open-ended greenhouses, is really good. Keep the rain off, keep the weather off. In those kinds of tropical climates too, you've got a lot more issues with nematodes and disease in soil and pest problems. And so but you can grow a lot of things year round, which is really nice. So there's pros and cons, but yeah, there's certainly a lot to it. No doubt about it. What else have you got here? Okay, specific farming question. LJ24 roller, but tighter spacing for larger seed. Jang setup for spinach. Using the LJ24, I'm not sure. Maybe you just have to increase your gear ratio. So the way the Jang works is there's a gear on the front and the back, and it works like a bike. So if you want to go really fast, you have a bigger gear on the front and a smaller gear on the back. And if you want to go really slow, it's like gearing down to go uphill. You have a smaller gear on the front and a larger gear on the back. So it might be that. It depends on how big the seed. I mean, LJ24 works great. I think that's what we used when we were using it on the Jang 5. I forget the gear ratio offhand, but if you go on the Paper Pot Co. website, it's all down there. Gabriella asking, can I get a Jang seeder in Argentina? I think so. I'm not totally sure. Probably. Might just be best to get it direct from Korea than get it through the US, because they all come from Korea anyways. Tax cattle. Yep, that's it. Any recommendations for LED grow lights? Doing a system in my basement this winter. I don't think LEDs are really that crucial, to be honest. So not really. I mean, I did a video from the field. Hey girls. I did a video from the field with a guy named Jonas back in, what was the date? And he talked about his lights, because his whole operation was LED based. And I did a short video on YouTube. Where was it here? Living Earth Farm. That came out on May 10th. Those guys are crushing it. He's got a bunch of experience with that. I don't use LEDs actually. Actually, no, I do have a couple. People send me free stuff all the time, so I do have some LEDs. Actually, pretty cool. But for microgreens, like, they're not necessarily that needed. Does temperature affect microgreen taste? I think so. I think it does, actually. I don't know any of the science on that, though. Patty Berry saying, do you use paper pot for lettuce, or do you just transplant by hand into? Yeah, no, I don't use fabric anymore. I just do all paper pot into just bare soil. So it was a thing, it was like a compromise we had to make. It was either you stick with the fabric, which saves you time in weeding and keeps the crop cleaner, but you spend 45 minutes hand transplanting a single 50-foot bed, or you go to the paper pot and plant that bed in 8 minutes or less. 4 minutes is as low as I've got, and then you might cultivate once or twice with a pine rake or a stirrup hoe to manage the weed. So it's costs and benefits, right? It's always weighing out those things. So how long did it take you to get enough restaurants to run your farm, and how many is a good number? I don't know if there is a good number. I think it's just whatever you're comfortable with and whatever suits your lifestyle. I know that at the height, when we were selling to over 20 restaurants, I hated it. I just hated it. It was such a grind, because chefs are they're the more high maintenance customer. They really are. And I think I was my happiest farming when I was just selling to retail. Farmers markets, no CSA, no restaurants. Actually, I always kept 2 restaurant customers that were always my lowest maintenance customers, that were easy. They always paid me. They were just nice, and I liked talking to them, and they were nice people. But I was my happiest when I was just at retail. It was just so easy. And that, like, dealing with people in retail is easy too, because produce managers are They don't have big egos like chefs. Not that all chefs have big egos, and not that all produce managers are nice people, but in my experience, that's how it was, and it was. I enjoyed it. So I don't think there's a perfect number for that. Yeah. So, anyways, guys, I think that's for now. How many of you are in this room? Actually, I don't even know. Where's the? Where is it? Let's just see before I wrap it up. Cool. 107 you watching now. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap it up. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend. Thanks for the questions, and I will be live with my good buddy Jean-Martin Fortier next week at this exact time at his farm. It actually might even be at our apartment in Montreal. We'll see. I don't know. Me and Jam might go and hang out and have some poutine and some beers in Montreal. So we'll see. Maybe we'll be at his farm. Maybe we'll be here. But if you're from the field member, you can submit your question to that thread that I set up there. I'll just share the screen for a second here. You guys can see. Just go to well, whatever. I don't need to show it. Just go. Oh, here, maybe I can. That's not my car alarm. Anyways, I'm not going to bother. Just go. Yeah. So if you're from the field member, just post your question to that thread. I think there's quite a few in there, and me and Jam will hang out, and we'll have some drinks, and maybe we'll get JM a little bit loose-lipped, and we'll talk shop. So I hope to see some of you guys there. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend. All right, guys. Talk to you later.